Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new year of Atomic Mass Transmissions Live 2023 coming at you with the very first stream of the year. We took, I don't know, 7 years off, it felt like last time, as we wrapped up for the December holiday season, and we all went on break, and everyone went their separate ways, and we all talked, and we painted cool things. We did so much fun stuff. I hope you had a blast at the end of year 2022 as well. But we're back, and we're kicking things off right with some Dark Trooper action. So I'm going to be painting at least one Dark Trooper today. Maybe if we get through this guy pretty quick, we'll paint some more Dark Troopers. I have like a whole unit here that I prepped, and then Summer was like, no, I only want you to paint one. And I was like, well, that makes it a lot easier. I cannot paint all of them in one go. So we're going to be exploring a way to paint black today, because I don't know if you know this, but Dark Troopers, primarily black. Very, very shiny in the show, so they have a high luminosity, a high reflectiveness to them. We're going to do our best to kind of replicate that a little bit in a fast and quick way using some glazes and some highlighting and all that good stuff while maintaining that nice underlying black color to them. We'll see how it turns out. Let's get going. This is the first time I've painted on camera in quite some time, so bear with me as we go through everything. Turn on light. Yeah. All right, so here's our Dark Trooper. We're just going to do a standard unit trooper. Here is our leader. Look at him on his big old cool jetpacks. But he was too tall, so Summer told me I couldn't use him. And then we have the Myrtleizer. That's right, it's not a spelling mistake. That weapon is literally called the Myrtleizer. Don't ask me what it means. I just know that it is called the Myrtleizer, and it myrtleizes real good. Cricket Batman is my favorite one, though. I love that. Another one of the unused concepts that we got to bring back, which LFL had all done up, but didn't wind up making it into the show. So we have our little, I don't remember the number, XV33 Super Blaster gun. And then, of course, I have my final unit trooper right here, because you got to take two heavies with these bros. And why wouldn't you want to? All right, so to start things off, really simple. I obviously undercoated them with a black primer. Really important note here is that even if you undercoat with a black primer, you should still go back over the mini that you're going to paint black with a normal black acrylic paint. So I've already done that because I figured watching a black miniature get painted more black would be pretty boring, but I did use the Scale 75 flat black for that. And the reason you want to do that is that primers have different properties than your normal like painting acrylics. So it's really important that you go through that process because it's going to make your final results look much better. So my first step here is I'm going to grab some Abyssal Blue, and this is kind of a nice bluish dark gray. And we're just going to start building up a little bit of highlighting on this fella. And my goal here is that I'm going to kind of build up my layers as I go along, and then I'm going to use some glazing to bring all of my transitions in line and make everything look really nice. So the amount of highlighting that you do is really going to affect the level of black that you're going to get. And we're just going to think about like where we want to go here. So we know that light is going to fall along these shoulder pads. And I'm using a little bit of two brush blending just to kind of like blend out my colors a bit, but you don't have to do this at all to get this technique. And I'm going to be fairly generous with this initial highlight because when I go through with my black glaze, it's really going to darken everything down as well. So I don't have to be super stingy with it. One of the nice things about painting black and really dark colors is that you don't have to paint everything. So the more flat black that you leave on the mini, the more black the final appearance is going to be. And it's really up to you how far you want to push it, how much of a black you want. If you wanted to do the really, really shiny kind of look that we see in the show and a lot of like the promotional imagery, where they just look purely reflective, you could even accomplish that with a really quick method of using some gloss varnish at the very end. And that, combined with a couple of minimal highlights, would net you a really highly reflective and polished surface result really easily. And I've seen folks do entire armies in that method, and it looks really, really good. Very quick, very easy to accomplish. So if you want to speed this up even more, it's definitely a way to go. People who are better about how light falls and how reflective surfaces work, if you wanted to make this look really good, having the reference open so you can see kind of like where the light plays. This is a bit of a non-metallic metal kind of approach too, because you have that really shiny surface. So there's like the really fancy art version. There's the fast and dirty tabletop version, which is kind of my go-to because I want these Dark Troopers to look great on the table. And I'm not necessarily worried about, wowing at a painting competition or painting for some kind of like higher level studio, which we could spend lots and lots of hours on. I want to get a unit done, ready to go fairly quickly. And another thing to think about, which I noticed as I was looking at a lot of the reference, is that depending on the environment that the image is from, so for example, in a lot of images that are taken like from the show itself when they're on board the Imperial cruiser, you'll notice that the Dark Troopers have a lot of blue to them. And that's because the environment that's around them, that's reflected off their really shiny reflective armor, has a lot of blue to it, so the light is very blue. If you look at some of the more like marketing photography where there's no environment or they're against like a white backdrop, it's very sterile and clean, the highlights come out like pure white. And so their reflectiveness, their luminosity is really cranked up in those because the light around them that they're reflecting is just pure. It's pure white. So one of the things to think about when you're, pushing yourself and going for a really natural kind of like black reflective surface or any reflective surface is what's the environment that you want the reflection to be in. And that doesn't mean that you have to like paint mirror reflections. You don't have to get crazy. You don't have to paint like the skyline or the mountains or the ground. The more you do that, obviously, the more artistic and impressive the effect will become. But even thinking about, okay, my army is based around a lava theme, and so the sky is going to be kind of like red-orange tinge, and we're going to have a lot of like magma, and the ground is kind of reflective. So instead of doing necessarily, say, a blue-black, you might want to add a bit of orange or a bit of reds into your black colors. And that will help make the surface that you're doing feel much, much more reflective and more realistic. And you'll get similar results. So, you can just do, if you want the really super stark white, you can easily do that. And they'll look really shiny. But if you want to kind of like pull them into the scene, if you want to integrate them into the story of your army, then think about the environment that your army's in. If they're on like a desert planet like Tatooine, you might want to put in a little bit more yellows and some ochres into that color and pull those ideas in and pull them around. So, all right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to really quick create a nice black glaze. So the idea here is that at each step, where is my Inktense black? There we go. So at each step along the way, I want to do a very thin glaze with my previous color. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of tie in those transitions and smooth out the jump from my base color to the next color. And it's going to pull everything together to make kind of like a really nice smooth sheen is generally the idea. Now the more, just like everything, the more careful you are with the glaze, the better the effect is going to be. And one of the things that I can do is I'm just looking to do that glaze over where the transition happens. So here, because I was pretty liberal with my initial abyssal blue, my transition's kind of everywhere. So I can just glaze wherever I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my secondary brush, and I'm kind of going to push that glaze around a little bit and make my second stage of highlighting a little bit easier. So, for example, like we know we want to go in there, and then we can push that glaze around on the underside and here. And so it's really about marrying those transitions together. And overall, your glaze should be thin enough that as we get going into smaller and smaller areas and we're only glazing between those transitions, it's not going to affect the dark color because it's just going to be the same color as the underneath. So in this case, I'm using my black here. And it's going to not be applied completely over my higher shade color. So like, for example, I'm avoiding his nose here because I want that to stay. I'm going to make it less over the tops of the pauldrons by pulling it out with my secondary brush. And so that's going to leave, as you can see here, we still have our color, but we can deepen up where we need it to be darker. We can leave it where we want it to be lighter. And this gives you a lot of control over your highlights while still allowing that color transition to look more natural and more smooth. And you don't have to worry about being quite as perfect when you're applying the color because you kind of have this little cheat. And the nice thing about the glazes is because it's slow to dry and it's very thin, if you mess up or you want to play around with different areas and stuff, you can do that. So like I want this underside of the leg where there wouldn't be any light to be a bit darker there, and maybe I want to come around here where these little cartridges are for this blaster over here. And I'm just going to kind of like play with these areas, tease out my glaze. And one of the things to also remember about glazes is that you don't do it all at once. So because we're doing kind of a really quick tabletop version of this, I'm not going to do several layers of the glaze. I'm going to do one layer and I'm kind of going to be done. I'm going to move on to my next section. The more time you take and the thinner your glaze layers, the more you build up that translucency and those transitions, the more impactful and stark the look's going to be, and the better the effect, the smoother your blends are going to be, just like anything else. So, depending on what you are looking for out of your unit and your hobby time, you can go quick and make it fast and easy, doing 1 or 2 layers at most. You can go way more layers. And that's the nice thing, again, another nice thing about this technique is that you have so much control over it. Because you're working with such thin layers of translucency, you really get to decide how much and how fast you want to build things up. So for example, just because these are going to be kind of focal points, the shoulders I might hit with a bit more glaze. And so we'll come back around because that glaze is dried, and we'll get an extra layer of our translucency, our transparency on there, just to really deepen up that area, kind of leave that highlight alone. And then around the helmet, because again, Faces, super important. Bases, also pretty important. But as humans, we're instinctually drawn to the face of whatever we're looking at. So it's such an important social cue for us. All right. So we'll let that dry. But you can already see, hopefully, on camera a little bit as the glaze dries and that sheen from the wetness goes away, how we've really smoothed out our colors. So we're getting these kind of natural and nice gradations. And that's just with our one layer. So I'm going to take some Arctic Blue next from Scale. I'm going to take a little bit of my base color, and I'm going to mix these together. Now I could go from one color to the next, and through an appropriate amount of glazing, I could create that transition really smooth. And that's one of the really cool things about using translucencies and transparencies in this way, the glazing technique, is that you can really blow out your highlights, like super blow out your highlights. And yet with the appropriate amount of glazing and enough time and patience, you can really bring them back and bring them in line and tone them down and have those transitions still feel smooth and be very nice. Very nice. It's hard to make W sound or B sounds. I don't know. Whatever letter B starts with. Who knows? All right, so think about this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to really quickly kind of tease this out a little bit. So you can see this on camera. Just kind of going to like moosh this paint around. And again, if I was doing the true glaze technique, I really would just kind of come in, do my line and be done. And then through a number of translucent layers, I would smooth those transitions out. I'm doing a little bit of a mixed approach where I'm using my secondary brush as a two-brush blend to help kind of smooth those transitions to start. And then I'm allowing the glaze to go back through and kind of make up for my less than stellar technique. So again, kind of come through here. And just pull those colors down. Pull that color down. And so this hard line here that we still have, because I'm not perfectly smoothing out that blend, I'm going to solve through that glazing process. And that's how I'm going to get my nice, better transition. And then as we get further down into kind of more of these locked in layers, I'm going to have to do far less work. And so this is another thing about painting, really reflective or shiny black or anything like that. If your light source is only coming from above, then there's obviously going to be a lot less reflection down at the legs. And in general, we always talk about how, the vast majority of your effort and work on a menu should be focused on the face and the upper torso, because that's where most people are going to look. And no one's really going to look at the feet or the leg. How many times do you notice somebody's shoes? You really don't, unless they're like, check out my new kicks. And then you're like, oh yeah, look at that. And then you never look at them again. So just as a general rule in miniatures painting, if you spend 80% of your time on the upper section, so right here, whoop, that little area, what you do down here is almost inconsequential. You always want to add a little color to it and everything, but most people really won't look beyond the face and the upper torso, unless there's a focal point on the miniature that is not there. So there are certain artistic stylings and choices made with minis where that might not be as true. You know, if you've got like a big old squid monster and its squiddy legs are kicked up or kicking around or something, and the sculpt itself is designed to draw your eye to the legs or the lower torso or something, you got to consider that, right? Like, where's the focal point of the mini? But 9 times out of 10, the vast majority of miniatures, the focal point is meant to be the head and the upper torso, because that's what we as people want to see. So you can just kind of like consider that stuff through. And here we're just kind of going to go, because we have nice machined parts, we can kind of do just a nice little edge highlight, blend it out. Knock that out. Come over here, same thing. So just using the edge of the brush, not the tip, but the flat of the brush, I can come in and really quickly define out those hard lines, because these rivets have those nice hard edges. And again, if I'm not perfectly smooth, or if I have a little bit of problems, that's okay. It's very easy to pull back with my glaze. So I'm not going to be afraid of really getting in there. But you can see how this is just pulling out everything. For a vehicle, it really depends on what type of vehicle. So like the Saber tank, for instance, you kind of have that focus with the hull, because you have those nice design lines and the color palette and stuff. A lot of vehicles, I would say the focus winds up being the turret, because it's on the top. It's usually where like the big scary gun is mounted as well. So when it comes to non-humanoid forms and things, you know, you kind of look at what's the most, if you close your eyes and then open your eyes, what do you immediately see? And that's a really good way to kind of determine focus, right? What's the first thing that jumps into your field of vision? What is the first thing that you notice? And obviously when something doesn't have a face, that can change. And based on what you're looking, you know, it's like how we see faces in everything. So you look at a funny car and you're like, that car looks angry. Look at its headlights. Look at the way that it looks. It's such an angry car. Like, well, it doesn't have a face at all. But our human brains impart faces on everything, because that's how we view the world. That's how we see the world. So a lot of the times when it comes to like a vehicle or something like that, you know, it's the front, the hood section. The kind of think about, well, if this thing was a person or a creature, where would its face be? And a vast majority of the time, that's where the focus is. But also those kinds of things are so large that they may have 1 or 2 different focal points, depending on which side you're looking at the miniature, right? So it could be that from front on, you have the focal point of, you know, the hood, the nose, whatever. From the side, the focal point might just be where, you know, entrepreneurial soldiers might paint a pinup or nose art, kind of like, you know, fighter pilots and bomber crews did on their ships and their planes. There's a reason that you see things kind of classically in the same spots over and over again, and it's because naturally those are the areas that draw the eye, that draw the focus. It's where we look first, right? So that's where you kind of put your design. You make the front porch of your house look really nice, the landing area, the front door. You don't worry so much about the side door, because people don't look at that. They don't see that as much. All right, so I'm doing just a little bit of work on the legs and the underside, but not not nearly as much. And part of the reason that I'll take the extra time here is because for miniatures that I plan to game with specifically, and they're going to spend a lot of time on the playing table. Oh, it's a summer. What's this?
I wanted to see those two miniatures next to each other. No? Stormtrooper?
I mean, I'll put that miniature on the camera,
You don't want to?
but that's not a stormtrooper.
Yes, it is. Stop calling out like that on stream.
They haven't even seen that yet.
Oh.
That thing is like,
I was trying to let you spoil something.
I mean, you put it back down. I'll put it on. I'll put it on if you want me to. I'm not throwing a fit, Summer. I'm just making sure you're not trying to get me in trouble, because that would have gotten me in trouble. I'm pretty sure, because no one would have ever believed that you put it in front of me and I just willy-nilly was like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to show.
Well, I'm glad that you knew better.
I mean, they're not.
It was a big test.
Was it? Was it a big test?
You passed. Good job.
That was a tease. I mean, my goodness gracious. You can get me like the Commander Cody or the Mandalorian. But what you grabbed, look, you bring it back out here, I'll put it on camera.
They've been asking for it.
Yeah, they ask for a lot of things. I don't think they know that they're asking for that, though, just as an FYI.
No. Hold on.
I mean, I'm holding.
Okay, we're gonna try this.
I can't wait to see what else you bring. What I've learned now is that we can't trust Summer around the studio minis because there are things there that, yes. This is a stormtrooper that's existed for a long time. The brush that I'm using is a size 2. So there we go. So you can see how big and chunky these dark troopers are. Yoop. All right, moving on. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my glaze now. So this glaze, I'm going to use the Abyssal Blue as my glaze color. So again, I mixed Abyssal Blue with Arctic Blue to create our highlight layer. Now, using the technique, I'm going to glaze using the previous color. So whatever my last color was before the new highlight, that's the color you want to glaze with. And again, this one, unlike the black glaze that we did first, which kind of went everywhere, on this, my goal here, see if I can show it, is to only do the transition. So I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to go right here, and then I'll kind of just smooth that out with my other brush, smooth that out with my other brush. And what that's going to do is it's going to help create a nice, smooth gradation between those two colors. So even though I'm going to gently pull it across the whole thing, you don't have to do that because we're going to go over that with another highlight. And so like, hopefully you can see this. This is the best angle I can get on it. I pull that glaze there. I pull that glaze there. And then kind of just use my blending brush. Not necessary again, but I'm going to do it just because it's going to help me do this in less glazing layers. So if I wasn't going to pull these around. Oh, do you want to grab the Cody mini? Because now we've horribly teased them. You did. You don't even know what you almost wrought. Pull this around. Pull this around. And then we'll come over here, do the same thing. So it's a really deliberate, and it is, you know, it's slower than just doing, say, an edge highlight or whatever. But it really does give you this nice smooth result that can be really rewarding as you go. And it is, again, a lot faster than, say, two brush blending the whole thing and building up your highlights through various wet blends and all that, because you can kind of just jump from stage to stage and allow the glaze to help with some of that smoothness. And we did a midline, but realistically, I could have gone in and just jumped from Abyssal to Arctic in one go, and that would have worked out just fine. So come in there, hit that. I'm not going to worry so much about those really fine edge highlights because I think those are already pretty nice and they're on really sharp surfaces, so we kind of want to keep that anyway. But like there, just kind of hit that. Can you find him?
I'm looking, sir. There's so many white ones.
Well, he stands out pretty good because he's white but with yellow. Mm-hmm.
The cauldron, correct?
Yeah. The only trick is that there's two different Codys over there.
So I'm gonna let you check to make sure I'm not exposing.
That's not it.
Ah!
That's not it. That's a stormtrooper, ma'am.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
I'm starting to think your goal of the stream is to.
My goal is to show them Cody. Because they're asking very nicely, and they deserve to see Cody. All right. Well, you know, we got 30 minutes, so we're not in a rush. Okay, we're going to jump up to our Arctic blue now. They want you to just take the camera and they'll help you find it. Yeah. Can't see anything wrong with that. You're not in the middle of, you know, all the secret central right now.
Let's have. You know what really needs to happen? Tony needs to organize his minis a little bit.
Oh, are we blaming Tony now? All right, I'm pretty sure that those things are organized perfectly.
They're gorgeously organized.
Oh my gosh. How I missed our time together, Summer. So now I'm coming in with just straight abyssal blue, and this is where we're really getting to our reflective surfaces. So these are going to be really sharp. And where I want a really high sheen, I'm going to use a lot. So like maybe we want just a little bit of reflection there, and we'll put a little reflection down here. This is kind of we're getting to the point where it's all either going to work or we're going to have a little bit of work to make it work. It's not a point where we're never at a point of no return is basically kind of the thing to remember. You can always course correct. You can always fix. But really all I'm doing is I'm just kind of like looking where I have my current highlight, and then I'm just coming in and accentuating that with a little bit more extreme highlight. And if we get really sloppy like we did there, because I'm going to blame the stand that I'm forced to use, but really it was just me. I'm just going to go back in and I'll fix it. And like on these shoulder pads here that we've been building up, we can just kind of like come through and get really stark. Just kind of like blend it back out. And that'll look pretty gross and like too much. Do I need to come out there?
No, Tony came and he can't even find it.
Tony probably has it in his office, to be honest.
Pocket.
Oh, I hope it's not in his pocket. That'd be a terrible place for it to be, Tony. I don't think Matt would have taken it for photos, but maybe. I want to come down here, this little corner. Maybe we'll have a bit of light falling over here. So one of the things you can do when you want to paint like kind of this high sheen is you can also look at like animation, especially cell shaded animation and those effects, and that can really help you with creating light, stylized light, and how it kind of bends and falls over surfaces. And I'll be honest, I'm not super great at it yet, but I find it fascinating how that effect works, and they do certain things that are just wild. Oh, we found it. Did we? Did we find it? Are we sure that's the right one?
Can you confirm?
It is the right one, yeah. You nailed it. There's part of me that's just like, if I didn't think I was going to get in trouble, I should just put the thing you gave me on camera and then be like, I thought this was what you meant. We'll get back to it. Oh no. My fat thingy rubbed off some of the paint. That's okay, we'll fix it. A second. Okay, let's see. Beep. So there's our Cody. Who was shown off at last year's San Diego Comic-Con in our very fun and informative, hopefully, panel that we held, where we talked a bit about Legion in general to all the folks at Comic-Con who hadn't ever experienced Legion at the Star Wars Hall, and then we went into Cody and his two 212 bros, Waxer and Boyle, as kind of our concrete example of how the Legion creation process really works. So that was pretty fun. To get to spoil them so early. And I'm really dig how that little pack came out, kind of riffing off the Echo and Fives unit upgrades that came in the ARC Trooper box, and it really let us define and create the ability for players to get that flavor of a different clone Legion, the 212 in there, with just one simple commander pack. So it was very cool. All right, so we're really going to push this effect on the shoulders, and then we may need a couple of glazes to pull us back into normalcy, but it'll be all right. We'll be fine. Okay. And let's go here. Come over. Come over. Okay, pretty happy with that. So now we're going to go to our mid-tone. So when you do this, you got to make sure that you've mixed up enough mid-tone, which I didn't do. So if you're going to mix, remember you got to mix enough to make a glaze out of. And if you don't, well, you're going to have to mix it back up and make a glaze out of it. So done. I probably will seal with a gloss spray for shine because that'll just help add to the overall effect. I don't do that very often, but because the Dark Troopers are just so shiny, it's kind of one of those things where I think they'll look the best if you take that extra step. But we'll see how the final effect comes out. If we do everything right and we kind of push our highlights and our glazes in the right way, we should come up with something that's pretty shiny on its own. And that part of that really comes down to how aggressive we are with our final white highlight and kind of our other edge highlights as well. So we'll just kind of play it by ear. But yes, a really easy and quick way to do, like say you're doing 3 units, because you know you're going the full Moff Gideon route with the Imperial Remnant and all that good stuff. And this is just Moff Gideon's crackerjack strike team of Dark Troopers. Then I would probably just do black, edge highlight with white, or like a really close, not a pure white, but a pretty close, like an Arctic blue, and just do a lot of edge highlighting. And then I would just hit them with a gloss varnish and call it a day, because you would get that really reflective and shiny look. And it would look pretty primo with very little effort. And so you could knock through an entire unit of them very quickly. The one thing that I don't like personally about using a lot of gloss is that you get the really shiny approach, but the problem is that sheen comes at a cost, and that cost is the fact that the gloss will glare, and it does make it harder to see the overall miniature details. So yeah, the gun and I mean the metal bits are not really meant to be as shiny. So again, we went real high on that armor panel, so I'm going to do a couple layers of glaze on this just because I really want to pull those colors together. But hopefully that really shows kind of the idea behind learning this technique and getting better and better at it. And again, I'm just on my own journey, learning things and practicing things and getting better and better. And I'm by no means perfect at it. But here's one of the really cool things. Let's just say, like, okay, so our shoulder pads are looking pretty good, but I've lost some of that black. It's not quite as dark as I want. So now I can just come in, let's say with my black glaze, and I can deepen up the shadows where I want the shadows to go. And if I keep that glaze nice and thin, I can build it up to where I want it. So let's say I want it more over here. Bloop. And then I can just pull it and push it. You don't just have to pull, you can push too. So one of the tricks with glazes is if you want a lot of control, push the glaze where you want it to be the most. So if I want this little rivet right here to be the darkest, I make my brush strokes go towards it. And then what happens is a little bit of the glaze is left where my brush stroke starts, but a lot of the glaze is left where my brush stroke ends. And so that is another like aha moment. And that's true of working with like any thinned paint, is that, you know, even if you're just doing kind of traditional layering with a very thinned out with a very thin paint that you're going to do a couple layers on, you know, remember Start your stroke where you want the least amount of color, end your stroke where you want the most amount of color. And because the paint is so nice and smooth and thin, where it gets pushed the most, it'll push really nice. And there, where it ends the most, that's where you're going to get the deepest, the richest amount of color. And where you push it away from, you're going to get just that little tinge of translucency, and it's going to pull everything nicely together. And so now you can kind of see how we can work with this stuff when we can get going. I've seen the question about programming slots and dark troopers, and honestly, I don't remember. So I'm going to leave that to one of our fine dev experts, maybe a William Pagani, maybe Legion lead developer Andrew Dursum. If they're around and in the chat, they'll answer. If not, the rules forum is a fantastic place to ask that question as well, where our crack squad of developers and rules forum moderators can provide you the 100% accurate and correct answer, whereas I would probably just be guessing because it's been too long. And I would hate to lead you astray. I know just enough rules to be dangerous. Summer clearly doesn't even need to know the rules to be dangerous. She's just grabbing things off the shelf, being like, show them this, show them that.
Hey, it's our first stream back. I'm being generous.
Are you? Are you?
Let's chalk it up to that.
All right. I mean, I'm into the generosity. But then you took it away, so are you really being generous?
Even you forced it that on.
I forced you to take it back, did I? Okay. All right then. I mean, I'll take it. I'll own that. That's fine. Like I said, if I would have thought that I could get away with it, I would have.
Well, I'm really glad that you knew that we couldn't.
But I don't have that luxury. Even if I didn't know, I'd still get blamed. They'd be like, well, you should have known. And I'd be like, how was I to know? Summer's in charge in this room. She's the boss. She is Tony Danza. In this room, she knows it all. All right, so really I've just gone into the tank here, and what I'm doing with my black glaze is I'm just going back through and I'm kind of like sketching out areas that I want to be a little darker, that I feel like have gotten too light. And every time I do that, you can kind of see how adding that depth of color and doing a really bright highlight next to a really dark highlight, it pushes the reflective nature of the material. So it's all about that contrast. And the more that we accentuate that contrast, kind of the shinier and the brighter those reflections will feel. So now I can take some purity white and my Arctic blue, and I can really come in. I'll make sure that's pretty nice and loose and thin. And then same idea. We can just head out. Those reflective surfaces. So here, I want a little more white in that. I want that to be a little bit brighter. It was definitely white. It was white. That's true. White as the driven snow. As white as these glossy highlights that we're going to put on our little dark trooper here. And so for the most part, because we're working with a miniature, I want these really bright zings of highlight to be pretty minimal. Because if they go too much, they'll kind of overtake our black. So less is more when it comes to this kind of seasoning. You don't want to overwhelm all of the work you've done everywhere else. So just kind of find those places of extreme light and let them get that little zing that they need. And then if you need to, you can use that blending brush and just kind of like smooth out the transitions. Let them really see it. Again, these are things that you want to focus on the upper edges. Because this conceivably is where, your likely above head light source is reflecting off of your material. Obviously, if you're getting really artsy or if you have like magma or whatever, glowing ground, that kind of stuff, then these reflections are not just going to be on the tops. Maybe they're not on the tops at all. Now we're getting into a level where it's like we're talking, get a Dallas Kemp or another more talented artist to come in and tell you how that would work. I'm going to stick to my zenithal light source where it's just hanging out on the top. That's where our light is. And we've kind of taken our sweet time on this because we can, but we could have skipped any of the mid-stage highlight phases and just done our extreme highlights and then gone back through and used our glazes to bring them back down. So again, you can speed this process up by skipping some of your midlines and then instead use that glazing stage to really bring that stuff back up. And that's the beauty of using translucencies and transparencies with glazing like this, is that no matter the level you're trying to go for, the technique remains the same. The results remain pretty consistent. It's just the overall level of finish and the smoothness of kind of the final product. And that's completely up to you. It's all about what makes you happy, about how far you want to go, what's the destiny of the miniature, as Dallas likes to talk about. And we'll come back to that again, where, made that a little too thick. If this guy is just meant to go with his unit of troopers, and there's going to be 3 more of them on the table, and we're just going to go murder some rebel scum, bring peace and order back to the galaxy, then you don't need to take as long, have as many stages as you might if, well, A, you just want to take the time and do it, that's a perfectly legitimate reason in and of itself. Or you want to push your painting skills, you want to take it to the next level. Dark Troopers are your favorite Star Wars thing that's ever been made, and you want them to be the stars, the centerpiece of your army. All of those reasons might lead you to doing what I'm doing here and taking an hour plus just painting some black reflective armor per guy.
TK had a question about the black you're using.
Yeah. Just like which types there are?
True black. Are you using true black or are you mixed with another color?
So I have flat black from Scale.
I'm gonna flash the palette real quick.
Okay, so this is just Scale 75 flat black. This is Scale 75 Abyssal Blue. This is Scale 75 Arctic Blue. And this is Scale 75 Fantasy and Games Purity White. And so these are the only 4 colors I've used. At each step, I've used each color as a glaze to go over the previous highlight, just to smooth my transitions. My glazes are in a well palette. And then just because I felt saucy, I did use a mix of about 50-50 of Abyssal Blue and Arctic Blue to create kind of a mid-highlight before going from this to this. Now, honestly, I probably could have just gone all 4 and then used the glazes of the Abyssal Blue to bring this back down. But I thought I had an hour, so I might as well just go through it. And now I see that I have 2 minutes. Summer, where does the time go?
Aren't you glad you only painted one?
Well, you know, if we'd painted the whole unit, we would have seen it speed style.
No, I want this quality of painting for the whole unit.
Oh, refused. Well, that's not true.
I'm the boss.
In my personal time, I'll do it. But I don't think we're coming back to Dark Troopers again. I think we have more things to cover. We got to get to that thing that you were going to have me show on stream, but, you know, it's not time yet.
It's not time.
I know.
They'll get to see it eventually.
You know, that's my hope, is that eventually they get to see everything that's in the little candy shop behind you, but it will take some time. Okay. So I'm going to skip. So what I really need to do is I need to do one last glaze layer. But I just want to add a couple of like bright spots. Just to really push our sheen and our shine. Okay, and before we leave, I'm going to grab a bit of my Arctic Blue, put it on my well palette, mix up a really quick glaze. Ooh. And just kind of go over those last transitions with that glaze to help meter it out. All right, and just really quick, go back to this. So I'm just going back to that Abyssal Blue glaze, and I just want to kind of push that back just a little bit because I got a little too excited because I'm panicking because the time's over. I have to say goodbye. But who wants to say goodbye? Parting is such sweet sorrow. So the spot on his head, I want to smooth out a little bit, but I will do that through a process of glazes and pulling those colors back and kind of tying them back together a little bit. So again, you can kind of see how I have a lot of control. And already I've pulled that really bright spot back down. I can do the same thing on his nose. I feel like that's gone too far. And if we want to just deepen that contrast even more, I can do this and go back to my black glaze and just push it real good right into those crevices. So again, there's no point of no return on any of this because I'm working in thin enough layers and I have my glazes that I can just keep going. But there, in 1 hour, is kind of our black armor. I'm pretty satisfied with this. So next steps would be to paint the metals, go and paint the glowy eyes, do the blaster. I would smooth out some of these transitions here with a couple more glazes, but we're out of time. Overall, hopefully this gave you some more tools in your toolbox, some things to think about, some approaches to doing colors like black or anything else, getting those dark troopers ready. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as Dallas Kemp is back. He's got a fantastic project he's going to be carrying out for the next couple of months. It's going to be really fun if you have any interest in like high-level painting competitions, seeing how really advanced painter approaches different tasks, get ideas, think about how to take miniatures and miniatures hobby and take it to a true art form. We're going to have a lot of fun going on that path with him. So you can tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then, of course, I'll be back next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific as well for more exciting action. Till next time, stay beautiful, be good to each other, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.